All right, I got a new Simh on the show today. She's a board certified functional health coach, the founder of 9 Arms of Wellness, and the author of the new book, Flourish from Within Feed Your Gut for Lifelong Health. Anu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jewel. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excited to talk to you. I know one of your specialties is gut health and that you work with a lot of women and helping these busy women lose weight, but also maintain it through the paradigm of gut health, which I don't think a lot of people ever think about. They always think about, oh, calories in, calories out. You got to work out more. You got to exercise. That's the paradigm, the reality that, we've all been brainwashed. But it sounds like you have a different take, which I'm really excited to dive into. Anu, I'm always curious though, how did you get here? Like it didn't, you probably didn't know when you were a little girl that you were gonna. This is one day. This
No,
is what you're
I
gonna be
never
doing.
thought, oh, I'm just going to be a coach one day. No,
Yeah.
especially being South Asian. That was in, but no, it was my own health. Like most practitioners, we come to it with, I, when I was going through perimenopause, I had a lot of gut issues, and it really was a point where I looked like most people do to traditional medicine for help, and we're talking, Joel, at a time when we didn't have ChatGPT or the internet to just Google for an answer. I had to go spend hours in the library trying to figure this out. I, did the traditional route, went from doctor to doctor, and it's really not their fault. They didn't know enough. We didn't even have labels back then, like SIBO or IBS, and I have no idea what I had at that time, but it was just enough to make me feel like crap, just really even things that I could digest before hit perimenopause, and it was like everything changed because the
Hmm.
rules of the game had changed, and no one had told me about that. And so that is when I discovered that the microbiome could be that missing piece of the puzzle, and I had read Sonnenberg's had come out with the book, The Good Gut, and I kind of just devoured it. It's like, wow, we actually have these amazing forever guests, and I knew nothing about it. So that became a passion. And I really learned a lot about that. And I thought, and then started making some changes. And then, of course, it wasn't like overnight, but it was very deliberate and intentional. And within few months, I started adding back some of these foods that were causing problems. And I thought, there is something to this. And so I started sharing that with people and said, "Oh, you need to share it with more people." So that's how it all happened. And I always say, I hear Maya Angelou's voice. When you heal, go heal others. It was important to me from an education perspective, because a lot of us, we just look to others for guidance. But I do believe that we have the power to change within us, and that's why the coaching aspect was so attractive to me, because all I was doing was be the guide by the side and just giving back people their power. Listen to your body, listen to what it's saying, and make the next right step. And that could be anything, right? If you've been on a standard American diet all your life and you're struggling with so many issues, then the next best step could be a low carb diet. It could be a carnivore diet. It could be a vegan diet. Anything could be an improvement on a Western diet for the microbiome. So that's how I see it, rather than being very, regimented about diet rules and things like that. So, no.
Yeah, love that. One of the things you just mentioned though is that the gut that you were able to really rebalance it quickly. Is it true that you can reset the gut in just a few weeks, even after years of damage?
Yes, that is the most interesting part. And there's a study that I find very attractive. They actually looked at women. They did a diet swap. Women in South Africa, rural South Africa, with women in Pittsburgh, and they swapped their diets. And the women in Pittsburgh were on a standard American diet. So within 14 days, the women in Pittsburgh had more anti-inflammatory markers, more of the butyrate producers and things like that. And the rural America, South African women, bless their heart, they just had more pro-inflammatory markers. So the changes are pretty quick, but of course, it doesn't linger unless you actually make lifestyle changes. So, and that diet is the biggest needle mover from all the studies that I had to do for the book. But so also is sleep and stress and exercise. All the things that we are passionate about really make such a big difference. In fact, they've looked at athletes and their microbial picture, and compare them to like couch potatoes, huge microbial profile differences. So all of that is fascinating to me and so interesting, because you can easily change that into just switching a few things in your life to make some changes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
so
so to
cool.
answer your question, yes, it does. But, and of course, Joel, it really depends on where the person is. Let's say someone has SIBO or IBS. You can't really start them on a high fiber diet and expect them to do well, because they don't have these, microbes doing the digesting behind the scenes, because we cannot digest fiber. It's going directly to the colon, and we have many microbes or bacteria that are digesting and producing very important metabolites for us. So initially, if you've been on a very restrictive diet, obviously you don't have the key players to go to bat for you. So, but in time you can, with the help of, like how I did it was, and how I help my clients with SIBO, is start with low FODMAP diets, increase some enzymes and things like that. And in time, they're able to do the digesting. And I see this happening. And I can say with certainty that most people are able to fix their gut and move on. Yeah.
Wow, that's super hopeful. Yeah, I guess it makes sense too, even when you're looking at like fecal transplants, right? People do quite well. Most of the time, we see that they do quite well just by having someone else's gut bacteria.
Yeah.
They quickly repopulate and they start to become a new person. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's very interesting. And I think that's when we found out even something like obesity is something that the microbes have such an big role to play, because we always think of obesity as a metabolic issue. But we know now that it could be a microbial issue, because they can
Yeah.
actually hold on to the memory of obesity. And when we lose weight, and why do most of us, 80% of us, gain the weight back? That's what got me really excited about this. Saying, why are people gaining the weight back? True, part of it could be the brain, the nervous system. You see all these biggest losers, like they lose weight as long as the doors are shut and they're within a certain environment. When they are they go into the real world, they start gaining the weight back. And that could be the brain issue, right? It could be that dopamine response. But from a microbial perspective, it could be the fiber, the butyrate producers, the inflammatory markers, all of that. And our microbes are really adept at digesting things like flavonoids, and they are great at extracting energy from our food. So um, just that is enough to know that if we have, regardless of the diet that you choose, let's say you are on a ketogenic diet, for example, I mean, you could still add all of these foods that can help you with increasing butyrate producers, for example. So I think there's room for all of us to improve our microbial pictures, regardless of the diet that we choose.
It makes sense too, I mean, thinking about even a lot of our neurotransmitters are right made in the gut. And so if you're talking about serotonin or happiness, talk about a little bit about that. Cause I know
Yeah,
even you've said that the root cause of anxiety, weight
yeah,
gain, brain fog. I mean, how does this all, I guess,
yeah,
come into when we're talking about our gut?
yeah. A lot of clients who come to me say, food is such a nerve wracking thing for me. I don't want to eat. And immediately, what I notice about them is they're very nervous, they're anxious, their mood's off. And so I start connecting the dots. It's, if you really think about it, we think of our gut as a second brain, and one of the reasons is that we have a neural network that is just brilliant in the gut. And there's, like you said, serotonin, 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. And I say this on almost every podcast, but I'm like, wow, 90%. It's like amazing. And the gut um, sends more messages to the brain than the other way around through the vagus nerve. So even something like really improving your vagal tone just has, for me, using that as a tool and the practice has been phenomenal, because these are all low key, not very expensive, something that you can quickly add into your protocol without, like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth every day. So just add gargling until your neighbors can hear you, splashing cold water on your face, things that I do personally. And I feel like it really improves humming, things like that really does help the vagal tone. And it's not just, there's quite a bit of science around that. And of course, what you see anecdotally in a practice is always useful, because that's the first step towards science. So I do believe that's important. So the gut brain axis is crucial. And I don't know if it's the brain causing gut issues or the gut causing brain issues. We're still kind of trying to figure all of that out. But it's very clear that when your gut is unhappy, your brain is unhappy.
Yeah. Talk about probiotics, because there's a lot of controversy around probiotics, and we were talking about this good bacteria, but do you think probiotics are actually helping, or are most people just wasting their money on
Yeah.
expensive bacteria?
I think there's so much confusion over probiotics because it's always the shiny new object, right? Something that looks really amazing. I think I think listeners, if they do know what probiotics are, so by definition, it is something that confers some kind of value or benefit to the host, which is us. So if you're looking to add a probiotic, then that is the first thing that you should be looking at. How is this helping me? And that could be from a supplement, it could be from food. So you go to the grocery store and you see a yogurt and it says live bacteria, contains cultures. What the heck does it mean? I'm not going to spend $7 on some yogurt that doesn't even have the decency to tell me this is the strain in the yogurt that we cultured for you. I would not believe, I wouldn't buy the product. But if they're very clear about it and say, well, this yogurt contains BB lactis 12 or Lactobacillus reuteri or something very specific as a strain, then I could use my knowledge about probiotics, and anyone has access to it, of course, through my book or somebody else's book or through PubMed. Google for strains that's going to help you feel better. BB lactis 12, for example, is a well-studied strain that helps with constipation, your gut lining and things like that. Lactobacillus reuteri really helps with, some people say, with the skin, decreases wrinkles, but it really helps with the gut lining and so many other things. So look for these strains, not just the family or the genome, because that really will help you decide what is in my best interest. So I think that's how you would choose a probiotic. And prebiotic, on the other hand, is anything that feeds a microbe or a bacteria. So that's coming from a lot of the different sources of fiber, prebiotic fibers. And not all fibers are prebiotic in nature, but it's so easy to add prebiotic fibers into our daily food. Even if you're low carb or, high protein, you can add things like leeks, onions, things like that into your diet to help increase more microbial diversity. So that's very important, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I think great advice. Also, though, someone that has SIBO or Candida, putting them on prebiotics probably going to mess them up even more, right?
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
why working with a practitioner like yourself is
Yeah.
really, really valuable.
Yeah. And I think for people with SIBO, it's like takes time,
Yeah.
and I don't want to ever tell people with SIBO that, oh, you're cured for life. Doesn't happen like that. It takes time, and it takes discipline, and it takes intentional eating and observation. You know your body really well. What is it that makes you super distended at night? Are you methane dominant? Are you hydrogen dominant? Do you have hydrogen sulfide? And really looking at it from a colon perspective, because when you think about SIBO, it's more small intestine. So there's a translocation of bacteria that shouldn't be in the small intestine that lands up there. So for whatever reason, right? And so our job is to really increase the good guys in the colon. So how do we do that? By increasing diversity. So if we have species richness, species evenness, you have more players going to bat for you. So it's just common sense to do that. And of course, these bacteria are doing a lot of behind the scenes functions for us. They are producing metabolites like short chain fatty acids, butyrate that decreases inflammation, insulin sensitivity, you name it. They're doing all of that. But they're also like producing neurotransmitters, vitamins. So it's in our best interest to have a variety of players and at a colon level.
Yeah, huge. I love what you said. One of the things too that you talk a lot about, Anu, is helping women lose weight, but you do it in a way without restrictive dieting.
Yeah.
Well, how do you do that? What's the
Yeah,
secret, that
I
people
just
are
find
getting
that
wrong?
very frustrating. And I think it's a social thing, Joel, as well. You may or may not agree with me, but a lot of women are so uncomfortable eating a good, hearty meal when they're out. Even, I mean, I've seen this in restaurants and my own clients. Oh my gosh, I don't want to eat that much. I don't know. And there's a judgment, right? Like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you eat like a guy, sort of thing. So
Oh,
there's
wow.
also that. So a lot of women are just, on very restrictive diets. And of course, if they are eating certain things that make them bloat, or they're uncomfortable, they're unhappy, they start mono eating. And mono eating does not help the diversity in the microbiome. So my first job is to say, where's your gut diversity? So I usually start with a microbiome functional analysis test. And I want to be clear that a microbiome test is not diagnostic at this point, but it gives us a good idea of who's in your colon, who's in your distal colon. Who are the people, who are the microbes that are your guests? Are they good, bad, ugly? You get an idea. And because when this tool sample is tested, you get a good idea of the live and dead microbes in your colon. And from that, we can figure out, how are you digesting your protein? Are you taking in too much protein? Are you adding enough fiber to support that fuel that they so need? Are you producing these neurotransmitters? There's so much we can, and it's a great curiosity thing, like, wow, this is what my gut is saying. And for a lot of clients, it's a great starting point. And from there, wherever they are, if they are on a standard American diet, changing it very carefully, just not going into an elimination diet, which is pretty common, because most people who are on restrictive diets have very poor oral tolerance. And that's basically what I'm saying, is that oral tolerance, meaning your immune system is responding to every food that you eat because there's not enough interaction. It doesn't know what you're eating is a friend or a foe. So we have to improve more oral tolerance, and that happens by the cheapest thing I would suggest to listeners is chew like your life depends on it. And I'm sure your listeners have heard other people say that, but I think it is such an easy thing to adopt. Chew your food, try to incorporate foods that have texture, because when you do that, you produce more saliva, you produce more enzymes in the mouth that are like amylase and lipase that kind of breaks down fat and carbohydrates, and you produce secretory IgA that will improve that oral tolerance. So your whole digestion um, changes and becomes better if you start everything in the mouth. And the mouth has like more than 700 species of microbes themselves. So if you
Wow.
want good, clean oral hygiene, and all of that is so connected to how you eat, what you eat, when you eat. We could talk about when you eat as well.
Yeah, let's do that, because I was gonna ask you what your thoughts were on intermittent fasting, and if you
Yeah.
thought that was something which I know ties in
Yeah, and
to
and I'm
women.
sure a lot of you guests have spoken about IF, about intermittent fasting for women. I see that as very bio-individual. Some women do really well on intermittent fasting, others not so much. But for people, since we've talked about SIBO, I've seen that if they have a good intermittent fasting regimen, like they have 4 to 6 hours between meals, then their MMC or migratory motor complex kicks in. It's basically like a little vacuum system that kind of clears out all of um, the trash and keeps your digestion on point. So for someone with SIBO, that's really, really important. And again, it's not that easy because someone on SIBO could be losing weight instead of gaining weight because they don't have a lot of nutrients in their food. And it's not on purpose. They just are not able to eat. So someone like that, I wouldn't say space your meals every 6 hours because they need small meals to help them feel better. So there's a time and place for every protocol, and it needs to be done with intention.
Yeah, so well said. Talk about a little bit. You mentioned this already earlier, I knew, but when you were talking about sleep and stress, but I was curious if if there's any studies or if there's any connection between when we don't sleep or when we're stressed, does that impact the microbes and therefore have a connection with mental health?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Joel, because uh, one of the research that really just blew my mind was that we have a circadian rhythm, right? But when I saw this research that said that the microbes have a circadian rhythm, it just was amazing to, just to see that. And what research is showing us that even one night of poor sleep can decrease your microbial diversity because they
Wow.
are so affected by our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm tells us that we need to go to bed at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, have that little rhythm, which is where my Ayurveda comes in. It's just like having that routine is super important for the microbes and for our health. And even one night of poor sleep can have you eating about 500 more calories the next day. And those calories are not coming from broccoli for sure.
I'm
I
just
know
wishing I
because
had more
one
broccoli. I'm stressed. Give me more
yeah, I
broccoli.
mean, like when I was writing the book, I thought, oh my gosh, in the morning I would be up all night writing, and in the morning I would be like, "Ugh, what's fun to eat around this? And of course, I don't have anything fun per se. Then I'd go to my husband's corner and say, okay, he usually has something, and you can't help it. That's just that dopamine response that's we're so connected to. So that's where habits and having a system and following that system is so important, because I think you probably see this too. We all make goals, but how do those goals, like James Clear says, I think it's amazing what he says about you need a system to make that goal, to realize a goal. I think it's great in anything that we do. So,
So key. And one of the things he says, I think one of his quotes is, you will only rise to the level of your
yeah.
systems,
Yeah.
right? So if your
I actually
systems
say
are,
that in the book because I've seen this with clients who make goals that are too many goals. I mean, there's only so much your brain can handle. Take one small goal, make small shifts, and that can translate to big changes over time. You add one plant source in you are added like 52 weeks of plant a new source if you really think about it. So it's very important to go small. And I think with diet, it's you fuel your life sustainably. So it needs to be culturally something that's connected to you. I work with a lot of minority women as well from different cultures. And this one lady made a comment saying, well, people always tell me I should eat Mediterranean, but I'm South Asian, I'm Indian. I want my dal and roti. So she may change to the Mediterranean diet for a few weeks, but is she going to stick to it? I
yeah.
doubt that. And so we have to really think about who's eating, what do they love to eat? Is it culturally connected? And, is it something that they can manage, sustain over time? So all of that is, I think, super important. Yeah.
So good. I love that you brought all that together because, you hear we're in such a culture too now where it's sleep when you die and, all these kind of things, the hustle mentality. And it's great. There's a time and place for that. Right. But it could be something that you're talking about, just a subtle shift with your sleep that could make dividends for your gut health, which then turns to your mental health, your physical health, and all these things. So I love that
And I
you
do
look at
believe
it
that
from that.
if you, a client or a listener can just try one thing for a week. Say, I'm just going to track my sleep this week, and I'm just going to see if I eat about 3 hours before bedtime, and does anything change? And that's a that's great information for the listener. They could say, okay, I've tracked one thing, I know this works. I'm going to try and decide to incorporate this into my life. That's so much more doable than saying I wanted to try 10 things, I don't know how to track them. This is one thing that happens to a lot of my clients. They come with tons and tons of supplements, and when you ask them, okay, what is this for? They have no clear idea if there's any benefit from it. Even with supplements, maybe just going, how is this supplement affecting me? Is it working for me? Is it giving me any benefit? I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So key, so key. I wanted to ask you a couple questions just in terms of, disease prevention, longevity. And I know something that you've done successfully is you've actually helped people reverse some of their symptoms in terms of autoimmune disease, diabetes, even depression. How much of that do you think really starts in the gut?
I think, first of all, I know longevity is a huge passion of yours. And I really think focusing on health span more than lifespan is what I
Mhm.
believe in, because I'm with my mom who's 93, and if you asked her, she would say I would have liked to die about 5 years ago when everything started going down. And I
Wow.
think that's true of most people who are older, and they see that they're not living the life that they once did. They're not as independent. So it really boils down to, how are you in your 60s or 70s? What is the life that you envision at 60 or 70? How much can you do? And for that, everything starts with, um, I don't want to say or romanticize that everything has to do with the microbiome. Obviously, it does not. There are so many other things like cardiovascular health, your endocrine system. We're a bunch of systems, and all the systems need to be doing its part. What they've done is they've done research on centenarians who have a good health span, and they've seen that their microbes have a lot of diversity. And I think there was this one study about a woman who was in her, I think she was 112 when she died or something like that. Can't quite remember the details on that, but what stood out for me was the study said that she had, or the research said she had the microbiome of a little child's. So it's more
Wow.
diverse, and so that was interesting to note. But I think even if we don't romanticize the microbiome, just to say, even in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, if you have enough diversity from fiber sources, adequate protein, good fats, those are the three rules that you really need to eat well. I mean, you can go all day chasing single nutrients, seed oil, tallow, or sugar. Not, I mean, how's that going to help for long-term sustainability of something? So that's something that I do strongly believe, that it's important to have some basic rules around food that work for you, your culture, and how sustainable is it going to be, and can you see yourself following this in your well into your 70s and 80s?
Yeah.
Do you see that helping? Yeah,
Anu, can you repeat that? Because I was going to ask you if you had you mentioned three, and I was going to ask you if what would be like three gut friendly shifts that someone could start making, no matter
yeah,
what they're struggling with, whether it's weight, burnout. These are probably universal principles, and you just said three
right.
of them. Could you repeat that,
So
or would
Joe,
you?
I mean, if if people read my book, the one big takeaway, and really, the more and more research that I did, the one thing that stood out was increasing fiber.
Mm.
you know, and you could do that on any diet. You could add things like chia, blueberries, low glycemic foods, psyllium husk for cardiovascular health. So it's possible for everybody to increase their fibers, so they're producing these incredible metabolites that are going to serve them long term. So I would say definitely that. So three things that would be that: sleep, I think, is finally getting its due. I think everybody should be tracking their sleep. And if they don't get nervous about it, my husband and I, the first thing we wake up and saying, "How's your sleep? What does your aura ring say?" And it helps to track things. What you measure, you improve. So that's really good. And getting a good handle about your own personal stress. It's impossible to live a life without this today's fight or flight instances. But if you can figure out what is the one thing that I can do to decrease stress, it could be anything. For me, it's meditation, it's yoga nidra. These are easy things. I do a lot of in between my Zoom calls. I call them like exercise snacks, because I get so nervous about sitting for long term. So I just go rush into the garage and say, okay, I'm just going to do some farmer's work, or I just do some pull ups, something like that, to get my body and my blood flow back. And so it's doable for everybody, I think, doing
Yeah.
this. So exercise is super, super important. And I don't know. I mean, for women, postmenopausal women, if they're part of your listenership, I would say strength training is monumental. And I could connect that to the microbiome picture as well. There's such a connection to microbial diversity and good profile, and exercising and keeping your body, in in a good place. So.
Wait, curious, what do you mean? How does exercise connect to the gut?
Well, it's not causal. It's just,
You're
from
just saying that if we
observational
look at a
studies.
population of people that are fit, they usually have
Exactly.
good
They've done
gut bacteria.
yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They've looked at athletes, and they've looked at couch potatoes. They've looked at,
Couch
and they've
potatoes. Yeah.
seen that they have some of, especially things like lactobacillus, bifidobacterium. Those
Yeah.
are the most studied bacteria, and they seem to be they have a better profile in people who exercise, and the diversity increases. So I'm willing to, take that as a starting point and say I'm going to exercise. But and your endorphins and your think about the neurotransmitters. You feel so much better after
Mhm.
you work out. But from a postmenopausal woman's standpoint, I think muscle is key. And I say that being South Asian and being an ectomorph, I've had to work really, really hard on my muscle, getting that leucine in the morning, getting enough protein, has been very important, but also making sure just because I'm eating protein does not mean that I cut out. You feel so satiated on protein that sometimes it's at the detriment of not having enough fiber. So having those two things in your diet is key, I think, to your health span.
Yeah. Love that you said that. Carnivore people are going to go nuts right now that you said that you have to have high fibers. That's good. I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
mean, I love Dr. Stuart Phillips' research. I feel like he's one of the most reasonable researchers out there, and he looks at everything. He looks at the importance of plants, he looks at the importance of protein, and he says this can work for anybody following any diet. And that's what we want. We want something for everyone, right? I could tell my clients, you've got to eat this much animal protein. And if they're vegetarian for whatever reason, or vegan, how's that going to fly? It's not going to help. So it's for
Yeah.
each person. It has to be so individual to who they are, and it's respecting them more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. I wanted to ask you, I know I want to wrap things up here in a little bit, but I mean, you got the book, which is a monumental heavy lift to get out. But other than the book, which I know is coming out here very soon, any other exciting projects that you're working on that you can share with
Yeah.
us?
Well, I have a live training actually this Saturday coming up on July 12th, and we have a lot of people attending. And I'm going to be talking about the microbes. It's your microbes. It's just something that I just want people. 2 out of 3 Americans have not heard the word microbiome, and I am on a mission to change that. If we can have everyone just have a basic understanding of what these forever guests are doing within us and how this is an heirloom that we pass on to future generations, because as we speak, Joel, we are having fewer and fewer species within us. We're killing a lot of the species because of our modern lifestyle, be it diet or, antibiotics or lifestyle, all of that is killing these microbes as we speak. So simple things that everybody can do to increase that microbial diversity, I think is a passion project for me. And anything I can do to spread the word, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I love your mission. I love what you're doing because I think there's, and you already know this, but the evidence is pretty clear that these gut microbes are controlling us. We're not controlling them. So
Yeah.
we better be kind to them and we
Yeah.
better be doing the right stuff to set us up for success so that we can live a vibrant, the highest version of who we were called to be, and that we can live in
Yeah.
that space as much as possible while we're here on this earth.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, okay, so we got the training coming up, so definitely tune into that. And then, Anu, also just where can people find you? Where can they connect with you if they want to learn more, if they want to reach out to you and they're interested in coaching, but even more so, like where can they live? Where can they find you on either social media and get the book, etc.? Let us know.
So my website is ninearmsofwellness.com, and right now I have a quiz that kind of gives you a good idea of. It's almost like a listening tool to see where you are in your microbial health. And once you take that, you're in my world, and you learn a lot about microbiome, health. So I nurture my clients to take the next best step for them. So that's actually right now that's the quiz that I have as a free tool to learn more about the microbiome. Yes.
That's amazing. You're already
And then I'm on
customizing things for
Instagram
them right
and
there.
I'm sorry.
I said you're already bio-individualizing things right there for
Yeah.
your clients based
Yeah,
on their
because
quiz.
right, I
Cool.
mean, when they take the quiz, they'll know if they are like masters at it or if they're just kind of, just starting on the journey, or they're doing all the things that are really causing issues to the microbiome. And if they know something, then it's easier to say, okay, I'm doing this and it's at a detriment for these microbes and my health. Let me change one thing. So that's an easy fix rather than going after everything, right? So that's what I hope to do with the quiz too. And then the book itself, Flourish from Within, is gosh, it's been a project, lots of research, and every time I would write about something, there would be new research coming out, and my editor finally said, no more. I don't care what you say. So along with this, what I've seen is we collect books. We don't really use them. We may read like one little chapter and we're done with it because our lives are so busy. I didn't want to write a book that's just collecting dust on a bookshelf. I wanted my listeners or prospective clients to be able to use it. So I created an app along with it. So the app
Wow.
really gives them everything they need to, how to read the book, how to take the next step, all of that. And then once they're done with maybe about 2 or 3 months of intense, introspection, then they can join my membership, and it's $19 a month. And anyone who does it right now, I will not change the price on them. It's going to be a founding price for them. And we have weekly calls, and we have guest lectures, and we have cooking videos, everything related to, hey, if you haven't heard the word microbiome, you will know so much about it. There's no escaping it. So
That is amazing. That is so cool that you're doing. I love that price too is so affordable. If anybody wants to learn about gut health from an expert like yourself and your caliber, I mean, what a treat. I mean, $19 a month. I mean,
thank you.
you can't beat that. That's a steal. So, really cool stuff.
Mhm.
Last but not least, where can people go out, and when is the book actually going to be released? Where can they go
The
out and
book
get it?
is, yeah, so the book is out this month. and it's sold where all books are sold, and it's also going to be on my website.
Exciting stuff. The book Flourish from Within.
And if
Feed
they
your
make it
gut.
to the training, I have something special for them.
Ooh, even better. Well, Anu Simh, congrats on the new book.
Thank
Really
you.
excited to dig into it, and would love to have you back on anytime to talk anything microbes, because we do want people to get that into their brain.
Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure.